want you to see something. You ready? This is a giant map of Switzerland. I love Switzerland, and one thing I have learned about Switzerland is that the Swiss like to be neutral. This country does not like conflict. They avoid it at all costs, which is strange because they're really good at fighting. Other European countries used to hire Swiss men to fight their wars for them, but back home in Switzerland, they don't fight. They don't take sides. That's partly because they lost a few wars of expansion and kind of just decided it was probably better to just stay put. But it's also because back when Europe was full of empires, the big European powers thought it would be a good idea to have a mountainous, small buffer country in between some of the big rival powers. And so Switzerland was kind of deemed this neutral power. But the result is that today Switzerland doesn't take sides. They don't send their troops to fight in other wars. They rarely join alliances. I mean, they're not a part of the EU, they're not a part of NATO, and they reluctantly barely joined the UN as recently as 2002, a decade after North Korea. And the only countries that joined after them didn't exist before then, meaning they came into existence after 2002, so they couldn't have joined before then. Switzerland is serious about neutrality. No conflict, no alliances, leave us alone.
When you're right here, right at the crossroads of people trying to take over Europe, staying out of conflict has big benefits for your country and its economy. But it also means staying neutral is really hard. But the Swiss have done it, using their mountains, some exceptional engineering, obsessive commitment, and a healthy amount of explosives. The Swiss have kept empires out of their country, sticking to their guns and staying neutral even when Europe was tearing itself apart.
So you're Switzerland in the 1940s. Here's your situation. You're surrounded by Nazi Germany to your north and fascist Italy to your south, and quickly are becoming engulfed with all the countries that are now in the sphere of influence of these countries. You're surrounded and Hitler is winning everywhere, but you're Switzerland, and so you're like, don't invade us, we're not gonna fight, we're not taking sides, we'll just keep trading with whoever wants to trade with us, but we're not gonna fight or be invaded. And no, that's not how Europe was in the 1940s. You couldn't just sit it out. And yet, the Swiss were committed to doing so.
The fact is that even with this commitment to neutrality, an invasion from their next-door neighbor, the Third Reich, was a very real possibility.
So, Switzerland devised what I argue is just the most Swiss plan ever to stay neutral during World War II and future global conflicts. It's a plan that still lives on today that you can still see when you go to Switzerland. Here's what it looks like.
First up, they looked around their country at any linkages to the outside. They chose key points around the country that would give invading armies access to the country, like roads, bridges, tunnels, any access point. And then they packed it full of explosives. Dynamite, TNT, whatever. Anything that would just completely destroy that linkage. They got really inventive with this stuff. Sometimes they would wire a bridge with dynamite, but they also would put secret cannons in mountains that would pop out and point at a major road and demolish it if needed, making it unusable. Or sometimes they would go to their long tunnels, like this 10-kilometer tunnel down here at the border with Italy, and they would rig it with TNT so that they could quickly seal off this part of their mountainous southern border. Up on mountain passes, they even rigged the sides of mountains with explosives to create artificial landslides to block the road. The thinking here is that if an invading army were marching into Switzerland, they could pull the trigger on all this stuff, igniting dynamite or shelling or otherwise destroying all the ways to get into the country, making it a lot harder to invade and giving them time to retreat to the mountains.
There's a wonderful, strange irony going on here. The Swiss are really good at transportation. The trains are immaculate and efficient and go up crazy mountains and are always on time.
Roam around the country and you'll see this. These are the little doors in the streets where they would pack explosives.
So it's kind of ironic that all of this infrastructure was packed with explosives. But I guess that makes it even more functional because now it's a defense mechanism in addition to being infrastructure for transportation. I love Switzerland.
There's this one bridge that connects Switzerland to Germany that was built in 2006. And when it was built, it was packed with explosives. This bridge was built in conjunction with Germany. Germany paved half of the bridge, and yet they didn't even know that it was rigged with explosives. It's very aggressive, Switzerland. Okay, so anyway, blowing up their borders and sealing themselves off was one major strategy for aggressively staying neutral. Let's get on to the next one. Zoom into the lower half of Switzerland, and you'll be struck by one massive thing that Switzerland has: mountains. Big, giant mountains that flank across the south part of the country. Another thing the Swiss have is an unmatched ability to drill holes into those mountains. The country has over 1,000 tunnels, one of which is 57 kilometers long. These people know how to build holes in mountains. And that skill becomes very useful when your situation looks like this. Most of the population lives here, meaning not in the mountains. And so there wasn't much of a separation between these population centers and Nazi Germany. After the Swiss saw Hitler march into Paris and take over huge portions of France, they got serious about figuring out what they would do if Hitler invaded. So they had their plan to blow up the borders and slow down an invasion. But where could they retreat to that would allow them to stay neutral and stay alive during the fighting? In the mountains, they were building giant fortresses and bunkers and tunnels that were literally inside of the Alps. They built thousands of these things in the side of mountains, and they rigged them with guns and cannons, as well as full-on bases that were equipped with supplies and beds and living space. Sometimes they'd be hidden in steep mountain passes, disguised as a barn, but really it would be a bunker with hidden explosives, supplies, and men ready to fight. All over the Alps, the Swiss built these secret bunkers, mainly during World War II, in preparation for any sort of invasion. Once the war ended, the idea of putting bunkers in the mountains for defense and neutrality became pretty embedded in the Swiss security doctrine, as well as just Swiss culture. So I did a call out on Instagram stories to see if this bunker culture was still a thing, and I got a lot of responses that showed me that it's not just World War II in the mountains. Swiss bunkers are all over the country. Jeez, it's a lot of bunkers. Thank you to all of those who sent me pictures of your bunkers. After World War II, the new threat was the Soviet Union and the Cold War and nuclear destruction. Bunkers were now built into homes, apartment buildings, hospitals. Public infrastructure of all kind had bunkers underneath it. By the 1960s, Switzerland had built enough underground bunkers and shelters to protect the entire population, and with a healthy surplus, something that no other country's ever done. Okay, so let's talk about the last step here, which is kind of the dark side of Swiss neutrality, and the one that no one really wants to talk about, but gotta talk about it. So let me reiterate here that staying neutral and safe when this is your situation is a very difficult thing. I mean, World War II was an incredible tragedy where millions of people lost their lives. During World War II, Switzerland had an official policy of neutrality. This meant that they would trade with whomever, whether it was the Axis and Hitler or it was the Allies and Churchill. But in reality, Switzerland traded a lot more with Germany, providing them with anti-aircraft guns and other military supplies and ammunition that was used in the war. In addition, Switzerland allowed the Nazi regime to store lots of gold and art and other valuables that were looted from victims of the war, and specifically the Holocaust. Not a super good look. Defenders of this will tell you that Switzerland was doing what it needed to do to stay out of the war, to stay neutral. And just like blowing up your borders or making bunkers in the mountains, this pandering to Hitler and being kind of on decent terms with the Third Reich was a way of making it more costly and more implausible that Germany would just pop right down south from where they are to take over this small country. Neutrality does not mean holding hands and singing Kumbaya. Neutrality in the Swiss foreign policy doctrine means deterrence and defense. There's a Swiss military saying that says, in order to remain in peace,
You have to have cannons. And this kind of sums it up. Not only did they have cannons and weaponry, but they also played by whatever rules they needed to in order to stay out of the war. And it worked. Hitler had a pretty developed plan to take over Switzerland, but in the end, it didn't make strategic sense. It was too costly and implausible for them to take over their neighbor to the south, even though he had taken over the majority of the European continent at that point. I will bet a large sum of money that the top comment on this video is someone bad-mouthing the Swiss for all of this World War II stuff. Which, whatever, I don't have a dog in this fight. If that's how you feel, that's how you feel. Okay, so these two massive global wars are over. And Switzerland is still neutral, but they don't have to take as extreme measures to remain so. So what do you do with all these bunkers? First, the bombing the borders thing, where they packed explosives in all of these bridges and roads and tunnels. Turns out that the military slowly started to dismantle all of this a few years ago. And by 2014, the military says that all of the mines and bombs and TNT have been removed from public infrastructure. Good for you, military. No more bombs at bridges. So for the household bunkers that were built during the Cold War, those are still there, and my friends on Instagram tell me that they're just kind of used for like storage rooms or sometimes like as a laundry room. Extra space, I guess, with really fortified doors that will withstand the radioactivity of a nuclear weapon. I mean, it's not bad to have. But what I'm really interested in is all of the mountain fortresses and tunnels and like bunkers that were in the Swiss Alps. What happened to those? Those were really expensive to build and were expensive to maintain, and the military is honestly kind of eager to get rid of them. Some of them have been sold off and turned into like fancy hotels in the side of a mountain. Others are used as cheese cellars to make delicious Swiss cheese. And then you've got this one, which was purchased by like a tech security company that specializes in keeping your data safe. So you can store your Bitcoin or whatever else you need on these super secure servers in the side of a Swiss mountain. They claim that these servers are so protected that they are impervious even to an electromagnetic shock from an atom bomb. Seems to me like a little bit of overkill, but if you have some really important documents and files that you need to save, this is your place. But the majority of these mountain bunkers and fortresses lie completely abandoned. If you hike around Switzerland, you will see these things everywhere, which is something I've never done and really now want to do. Go like bunker hunting in Switzerland. Sounds kind of amazing. All right, so the Swiss stayed neutral. They've continued to stay neutral. They will probably continue to stay neutral. And it turns out they will use whatever means necessary to do so. Thanks for watching. All right, I want to tell you about Squarespace. Squarespace is the sponsor of today's video. Thank you, Squarespace, for supporting this channel and letting me make this cool video about Switzerland. But also thank you, Squarespace, for being a really useful and user-friendly platform where you can build websites and email campaigns and all of these things that make running a business or having a portfolio or being a creative person a much smoother experience on the internet. Squarespace has these beautiful templates that you can use to quickly put up a website with whatever branding you need to do to be able to customize it, but also not have to worry about the technical nightmare that is designing a website if you don't know web design. I'm using Squarespace right now to do a revamp of my own website and my own social and internet presence. And I'm very pleased with how simple and easy it is. It integrates with email campaigns, which is a really important thing if you have a business, to be able to have email lists and do email marketing. It integrates with social platforms and everything you can imagine. So if you want to get a free trial and 10% off your first purchase of a template or a domain, go to squarespace.com/JohnnyHarris and you will get this discount. Purchasing through this link helps support this channel, so it'd be great if you click the link in the description or go to squarespace.com/JohnnyHarris and check it out. Squarespace is great. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video. Thank you all for watching. I've got a lot of really cool videos coming up and I'm really excited to share them with you. All right, have a good day.